Week 2 is in the books, so let's dive into some players that I'm looking to trade for after 2 weeks of NFL games. The first is a combo pairing of elite wide receivers who have not lived up to expectations at all to start the year. The first being Justin Jefferson, who has been held back by the growing pains of J.J. McCarthy's first 2 NFL starts of his career, but we now also have the news that J.J. McCarthy is not only going to miss week 3 and possibly even more games, but now that Carson Wentz is going to start at quarterback, which I'm sure doesn't get a ton of people super excited. Through 2 weeks, Justin Jefferson is a fringe top 20 wide receiver, averaging around 13 PPR points per game, which isn't bad, but it's not Justin Jefferson, and only 13 targets through 2 games is also not great. There have actually been 8 receivers already this year to have 13 targets in a single game, and Jefferson is just getting there through 2 weeks. I think one thing that we collectively as a community just forgot or ignored was that this is essentially J.J. McCarthy's rookie season, and while we could argue that he isn't a rookie because he redshirted last year, there's still only so much that you can do to learn information by being shown and talked to, but not actually doing, especially when a good majority of the past year for McCarthy was spent rehabbing from his knee injury and not actually throwing and practicing with the team. So not only were these 2 past games the first games of McCarthy's NFL career, but they were also the first for him after a bad knee injury that kept him off the field all last season. We should have expected some growing pains despite the Vikings' success with pretty much every other quarterback they've had back there under Kevin O'Connell. But all of those guys were veterans in the NFL and not really, for all intents and purposes, an actual rookie quarterback. And as I said, now McCarthy is out for at least 1, if not even a few weeks with a high ankle sprain, and in his place comes Carson Wentz. And while people will joke that Wentz is now a starter in the league again and he sucks and blah, 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 you know what Carson Wentz is that J.J. McCarthy isn't? A veteran in the NFL with multiple years of experience as a starter and even a former MVP candidate. That is like the exact formula for all the other quarterbacks who were thrown away by the NFL to then come into Minnesota and have success. And outside of Kirk Cousins, Wentz is actually the most successful quarterback to come in here and start. He's better than Case Keenum was, Josh Dobbs, Sam Darnold, and Nick Mullins. So I don't think it's unrealistic to believe that Carson Wentz can come in here and do pretty well for the Vikings, and a lot of his success will probably also come on the back of just throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson. And then when J.J. McCarthy comes back, they can continue working through his growth through the second half of the year. So I would love to be buying J.J. McCarthy right now, and I'm not really expecting any sort of discount to buy Jefferson today, but I do know that people are a little bit worried about him already because of McCarthy's struggles, and now that you have Carson Wentz in for maybe a month, I don't think people really love that either. I'm sure if you offered up Rome Odunze or Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, maybe even like Emeka Ibuka as your base wide receiver to trade for Justin Jefferson, you could probably get a deal done to receive arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. The other elite receiver who is massively underperforming right now is, of course, Brian Thomas Jr., who is actually tied for 12th in the NFL for total targets through 2 weeks with 19, which is tied with Teteroa McMillan, 1 fewer than Puka Nacua, and 2 fewer than Jamar Chase. Yet Puka is the current wide receiver 1, Chase is the wide receiver 6, T-Mac is the wide receiver 17 going into Monday night, and BTJ is wide receiver 49, and he hasn't even had a game yet of over 9 PPR points. I said that maybe some people are a little bit worried about Justin Jefferson already, but it is still Justin Jefferson. He can still figure it out. But I know for a fact that people are losing their minds over Brian Thomas Jr. because the issue is both Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas himself. In fact, if you scroll through social media at all, I'm sure you could find someone breaking down the all-22 of BTJ's Week 2 performance, where he turned 12 targets into 4 catches for 49 yards and was avoiding contact. He was giving up on routes and throws and dropping passes right in his hands. He really did look bad this past week. But Trevor Lawrence is as much to blame for this poor production too. In Week 1, he missed BTJ on a handful of wide open routes, just straight up overthrew him or just way off target. And even on Sunday, he threw a couple inaccurate passes that people are blaming BTJ for, but I personally blame Trevor Lawrence. So from this point, there are really 2 things that can happen from this point on. BTJ either loses volume because Lawrence or Liam Cohen just don't trust him anymore, and BTJ just continues to be outproduced by Parker Washington and Diami Brown on the team, or option 2, they all figure it out and the Jaguars rediscover how to use their 2024 breakout rookie sensation, who is a top 5 fantasy wide receiver last year. Personally, I choose to lean towards the latter because on paper, when I see an elite wide receiver with elite target volume but no production behind it, I lean into that player even more because I know that they're going to be due for a big game or a big stretch of games very, very soon. As I mentioned already, BDGE has 19 targets, which is top 12 in the league, but he only has 5 receptions. Something is going to break here, and I'm choosing to believe that it's going to break in BTJ's favor, and the volume is going to win out soon. If you can flip guys like Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle, or guys like Quentin Johnston, Ricky Pearsall, and Cooper Kupp for Brian Thomas Jr. right now, that is an absolute steal. I would still rather have BTJ than Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. because I believe in the talent, and it's just too early to throw out all of our preseason beliefs, all of our values, all of our ADP on a player that we know is elite. Before we get to the running back position, there is one tight end that I wanted to bring up in this video, and that is Juwan Johnson for the New Orleans Saints, who has essentially become the 2025 version of Jonnu Smith in this offense. Over the past 2 weeks, Johnson has been in the 90+% of route participation, has seen on average a 25% target share, and has scored 15 plus PPR fantasy points 2 weeks in a row. I mentioned BTJ is tied for 12th in the league for targets. Well, Juwan Johnson is tied for 8th among all players. We had wondered if Kellen Moore's affinity for the slot position would transfer over to New Orleans and if it could possibly be beneficial for Juwan Johnson in that role. And 2 weeks into the season already, it really does seem to be the case. The only question then becomes, where does Juwan Johnson fit in rest of season rankings at the tight end position? Which tight ends would you still prefer over him? For me, it's Brock Bowers, it's Trey McBride, it's still George Kittle even with the injury. Then I would also include Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren to just round out my top 5 rest of season tight ends. But after that, I think Juwan Johnson might be a better weekly starter than Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews especially, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts. I don't blame you for preferring any of those guys still over Juwan Johnson right now, but he is at least in that conversation if this massive route and target usage continues. It's not like New Orleans is even a great team. It's not like they're overproducing their expectations like the Colts are or the Cardinals are to a degree or whoever else we think is in there, and we're nervous if that production is going to keep happening and be sustainable. The New Orleans Saints are probably going to have to keep throwing because they're just not that good of a team, and at least for right now, Spencer Rattler is doing enough as a high volume passer to get the job done for his weapons with and without touchdowns. Their schedule isn't even all that difficult either. They still have all 6 divisional games left. They have the Titans, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bears, the Patriots, Giants, Seahawks. Not to say that they're going to win a bunch of those games, but if they're going to be somewhat competitive against not so great defenses, that's going to be a good thing for Juwan Johnson. If you have Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Dalton Kincaid, Pitts, Kelce, any of those kind of tight ends, I would give it a shot to see if you can flip them for Juwan Johnson, even if you have to add something to get to him right now because he is so hot. Now, at the running back position, even with the news of Joe Burrow's injury that will keep him out for 3 months, which is effectively the rest of the season, I still want to buy Chase Brown. Through 2 games, Brown is actually 5th in the league in rush attempts, so the volume is extremely high for him on the ground, but he is 24th in the league in rushing yards and also 24th at the position in total targets. He is actually the only running back right now below 100 total rushing yards through 2 weeks to have more than 30 rush attempts. He just hasn't been efficient at all. But I'm willing to give him a pass so far because of the teams that he's played against. Cleveland has always been a very good rush defense. They were 7th against running backs last year, bottom 12th against them in 2023, and also just shut down Derrick Henry this past weekend to 2 yards per carry, same as Chase Brown. And I don't hear anybody complaining or being worried about Derrick Henry right now. Really, the main issue for Chase Brown is the lack of receiving work that he had at the end of last year, and we had heard through the summer was going to be a focal point of his game again this year. Through 2 weeks, he has 6 total targets, which isn't terrible, but when Brown's the type of player who can almost see 6 targets a game, half of that per week is just not going to get it done for fantasy football. And now we don't have Joe Burrow for the rest of the year. Jake Browning is the starter unless they trade for Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins or somebody like that, which could honestly be very fun. But in 2023, under Jake Browning, Joe Mixon actually averaged 18.1 PPR points per game as the RB4 over the second half of the season. He averaged 18 touches, almost 90 total yards, and pretty much 1 touchdown per game. Browning's presence did add some inconsistencies for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but Mixon was great with Jake Browning, and I do hope Chase Brown is the same way, a player that Jake Browning and the offense can lean on a bit more to move the chains and also complete easy passes in the short area of the field. Listen, I'm not strictly buying Chase Brown just because of what Joe Mixon did 2 years ago with Jake Browning. I am buying Chase Brown for the volume that he's already receiving, which is top 5 in the league for rush attempts, combined with inefficiencies in production on that volume that could sort itself out as the season goes on. Then with the potential cherry on top that more volume could be coming Brown's way because Joe Burrow is out. If you can sell high on James Conner, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt for Chase Brown, I absolutely love that. Or if you can find ways to move off of your unproductive rookie like Travion Henderson or R.J. Harvey, that could give you a volume boost right now that can help you win games this early in the season without having to wait for your rookies to finally do something. And the last player on today's list is Steelers running back Jaylen Warren, who I think is going to be the starter for Pittsburgh well beyond my original beliefs for this backfield and way longer than even the most hardened Warren truthers actually believed, because Caleb Johnson is just not doing himself any favors. And this is as much about Caleb Johnson's fall as it is Jaylen Warren actually looking and producing very well. Warren is actually the RB12 in fantasy football prior to Monday night, so a top 15 running back at worst through 2 weeks. He has seen 13 plus touches in both games, including 18 touches this past week against Seattle. And while he hasn't been all that efficient on the ground, only averaging 3.4 yards per carry, he has been an absolute weapon through the air, and I think Aaron Rodgers loves having him as a check down option. The other benefit with Warren is it seems like Pittsburgh defense just kind of sucks all of a sudden. They've given up 30 plus points in 2 straight games to Seattle and the Jets. So if their defense isn't that good, they're going to find themselves in more neutral or even passing situations where Warren can be the main guy both on the ground and through the air. And the longer that he continues to just be their best running back on the team, the longer he's going to stay in that role and hold Caleb Johnson off, which, as I mentioned, he is not helping himself either. He's got 2 muffed kick returns throughout this year already, including this past week where that muff turned into a Seahawks touchdown. Johnson might actually be really just falling apart right in front of our eyes as a historical rookie bust for the ages, and the more that Caleb Johnson hurts himself, the better Jaylen Warren is just going to look by himself as well. I think Warren really represents a solid value still as a cheap running back who most people just got late as bench depth and may not be starting still with better options ahead of him. So if you need an actual starter or a flex option and you don't want to break the bank for like an actual top 15 guy in name value, go get Jaylen Warren. Trade Tyrone Tracy or Nick Chubb or Isaiah Pacheco as the base for your trade offer, or one of your bench wide receivers if you're heavy at that position and you need some running back depth. Warren's probably going to be a very steady producer who may not have a super high like 20 plus point ceiling, but you know that he's going to get you 13 to 17 points pretty consistently with his volume and touchdown opportunities on a very solid offense under Aaron Rodgers. But if you're looking for some other names to buy or just moves to make in general after week 2, I highly recommend checking out Caleb's video from earlier this week, which you guys can find right up here.